Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Dr. Mark Foster Show. Today I wanted to address the subject of embodiment, which is a concept that is fairly common in academia, in sociology, in anthropology, in psychology, philosophy, and other fields, but perhaps is not that much discussed in the public sphere. So I wanted to introduce that into this podcast and perhaps discuss some of the implications of embodiment and its importance at this particular time. Embodiment is a way of discussing the way in which the human body and the appearance of the body or the position of the body can impact a person's life. That, for example, Black Lives Matter, a movement that was started by 3 African American women, originally as a Twitter hashtag, and then became a website. It is not and never has been an organization. I know that there are some police officers that have expressed unhappiness with Black Lives Matter. They see Black Lives Matter as some kind of a threat, but factually, Black Lives Matter does not exist. Anybody who wants to say, I am Black Lives Matter, as I have on occasion, even though I'm not African American, can say it. It simply means that one understands the situation which exists in the United States, where so many African Americans have been killed by police, both women and men. The men have gotten most of the attention, but many women have been killed as well, have been assassinated by police. Many innocent women and men have been assassinated by police. So that's one aspect of embodiment, what it means to be an African American in today's world, something which I cannot experience, something which I can only relate to through empathy, but something which I will never know firsthand, since that's not a part of my life. It's nothing that I've ever experienced. Similarly, female embodiment, the experience of living as a woman in modern day society, well, perhaps it's somewhat better than living as a woman back when I was a child, when women basically were not permitted in the public sphere to speak at all, or speaking was certainly seen as inappropriate, especially extensive speaking. Women would mostly speak among themselves, but would not generally engage in conversations with men other than their own husbands. That has changed significantly, but still, the experience of being a woman in the 21st century is different than the experience of being a man. Women are still targeted for sexual harassment. Women are still subjected to rape at a much higher rate than men are. Women experience all forms of sexual discrimination that men will never experience. And that kind of discrimination is an example of the kind of embodiment that women have that men simply do not. I remember when I was a kid, for example, there was a commercial for a now defunct airline called National Airlines, and I may be remembering this incorrectly, but I'm pretty sure it was National Airlines. And the commercial was that they would put this woman out there who was a quote-unquote stewardess, today a flight attendant, and this woman, generally a very attractive young lady, would appear before the camera wearing a stewardess outfit and would say, "Hi, I'm National, fly me." Or sometimes, "Hi, I'm Stacy, fly me." Now the implications of that, the sexual implications of that, were clear. It was a way that of getting a kind of sexual orientation into a commercial, which really couldn't be done as explicitly back then, which was the 1960s, but implicitly it was done all the time. And that was certainly a very clear sexual commercial, asking a man to fly me. And there were all sorts of commercials and situations like that which portrayed women as sexual objects. For that reason, generally it is called objectification. The objectification of women, turning women into sexual objects, is a type of embodiment. One of the implications of being a woman in the Western world. Now, embodiment can vary greatly from society to society. In today's Saudi Arabia, women are expected to wear full head coverings. That is obviously not an expectation in the Western world. So the kind of embodiment that women experience in Saudi Arabia and experience in the US are quite different. Even if you compare Iran with Saudi Arabia, in Iran women are also expected to wear head coverings, and yet in Iran women are often corporate executives, run businesses, something that you would never find in Saudi Arabia. Women have also always driven cars, something which has only recently been permitted in Saudi Arabia. So embodiment can vary significantly from one society to the other. What it means to be a woman, one place, and another place can be vastly different. Disability. Speaking as an autist, an autistic, having grown up as an autist at a time when autists were referred to as childhood schizophrenics, which was my official diagnosis as a child. And yet, if you read the diagnostic manual, the DSM-1 and later the DSM-2, childhood schizophrenia was defined as autism. So that was literally the name for autism by the American Psychiatric Association back in the 1950s and 1960s. So, in effect, my body was treated as if I was psychotic. I was put on psychotropic medications which dulled my mind. I was hospitalized for about 6 weeks, where I received a series of about 12 electric shock treatments, which, as far as I know, have no benefit at all for autists, but I imagine they thought that since I was supposedly delusional or schizophrenic, which I never was, I was always very much aware of who I was and the situation I was in, that perhaps I would benefit from receiving this electroconvulsive therapy. Now today, the embodiment of autistics has changed. It's still not necessarily that great. There are all these hoax treatments, for example, the anti-vaccine idea that somehow vaccines cause autism, and of course there is absolutely no evidence of that at all. There is no cure for autism. Hopefully there will be at some time, but as of now there is not. And yet there are a lot of clinics and organizations which claim to be able to cure autism incorrectly. and many people will bring their children to these places, which are basically hoaxers, in the hope of getting their child cured of autism. So that's another kind of embodiment. The embodiment of a disabled person. And as an autist, I am a disabled person. I am somebody who has experienced oppression on the basis of having some kind of a neurological difference or distinction from the majority of people in the world. Those are all different kinds of embodiment. So embodiment basically means, what are the implications of being in a particular kind of body? Once you understand what kind of body a person lives in and how they are treated on the basis of living in that body, then you can begin to address the problem. So the fact that those women pointed out that so many African American women and men were being killed by police brought some attention to the issue. Whether that did any good, I think, is questionable, but at least it brought some attention to it, and maybe it will do some good eventually. The fact that so many women have complained about sexual harassment brought some attention to that issue. Again, how successful that has been, I don't know. Perhaps the most effective social movement, at least in recent times, has been the gay rights movement. The gay rights movement has been effective because, unlike many previous social movements, it has been successful in accomplishing one of its primary objectives, namely to allow same-sex people to become married. The marriage equality decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. That was a major achievement for people in the LGBT community, specifically lesbian and gay Americans. Something which had happened in some other countries, but happens in the United States a while later. So the gay rights movement has been effective because, to a large extent, what many lesbian and gay people did quite effectively is to say, well, if you believe in liberty, then why would you single out an entire segment of the American population and say, well, we're entitled to liberty, but you are not? And that was an argument which became very difficult to refute. So today, most people, even some very, very conservative people, have accepted the legitimacy of marriage equality. There is hardly any dispute at all in the public sphere anymore over whether women can marry other women and men can marry other men. It's simply not a controversial issue anymore. Most of the American right wing has simply moved on to other issues. So embodiment is an important issue because it allows us to focus on the impact of the way in which a particular person's body is perceived and then treated by others in society. The way in which people with certain kinds of bodies receive relative advantages, like white males, and other kinds of people, like black females, do not receive those same types of advantages. That concludes this episode of the Dr. Mark Foster Show. Until next time, have a good one.